Hey, family. Wow, am I excited about today's guest. And after you've listened, I know you will be too. This is one you're probably going to want to listen to over and over again. Today, Jay Ruderman is our guest. And let me read to you about Jay. Jay's focuses life work on seeking social justice by advocating for people with disabilities worldwide. He also educates Israeli leaders on the American Jewish community. And as president of the Ruderman Family Foundation, Jay's ability and approach has led to the foundation becoming a leader in inclusion and disability rights advocacy, both nationally and in Israel. Now, his emphasis on philanthropy has been instrumental in the foundation creating programs around the world, as well as raising awareness on social media. He's also been emphatic on the creation of the foundation's often cited white papers. And in our conversation, he shares one in particular that has just continued to get reference back to around policemen with disabilities. So I think you really are going to learn a lot from this one that impacts all of us every day. But here's a bit more on Jay before we get that conversation started. Jay has never shied away from controversy, consistently challenging Hollywood and those in power to push his issues forward around people with disabilities. You know, prior to beginning his career with the foundation, he was a law assistant in the district attorney's office, and then he was enlisted in the Israel Defense Forces, known as IDF, and became a liaison between IDF and Diaspora Jewry. That's a lot for even one lifetime, but Jay went on to do things like serving on the board of directors of the National Organization on Disability and the University of Haifa. He previously served on the board of directors of the Jewish Funders Network and the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee. Jay is a graduate of Brandeis University and received honors and his JD from Boston University School of Law. He lives in Boston with his wife, Shira, and their 4 children. And I'm so excited to have him as a guest today. Join me in listening and welcoming Jay Ruderman. Jay, thanks so much for this conversation today we're about to have. You know, I've wanted you for some time to visit because so much of what you care about aligns very well with where we're working and where we're living today. Before we go into that, though, I want to know a little bit about Jay and how you got to where you are. Our listeners are going to be very excited to know your journey.
Well, thank you, Janice. It's a pleasure to join you today. I sort of had a path that I didn't really expect when I got out of university and law school. My path was first law and then politics. Politics has always been my first love, and public policy. And I guess along the way, I grew up in a household that I would say was middle class, upper middle class. My dad did very well in business. He used to say that his success was 80% luck and 20% hard work. But I remember him sitting us down when I think I was in college and saying, listen, I've acquired some real wealth over the years. And he said, listen, you've been the one in the family who's been more caring and more involved in societal issues. And I'd like you to take over running a family foundation that I'm going to establish. And initially, I rejected his offer because I looked at philanthropy as very passive, funding other people to do the real work. But I think over time, I realized that philanthropy could be shaped and molded in the direction that I thought it should go, which is more of an activist philanthropy. And now, a couple of decades later, I mean, that's where we are. I would say that I spend my time mainly as an activist who's also involved in philanthropy.
You say something so important that touches all kinds of stuff that we got to get back to. One of the things you mentioned, you're political. One of the things that, and I think all of us are to degree, even if not by nature, and have a responsibility to it. One of the things that I've been encouraging young people, without going into where they come from politically, is that your vote is one of your strongest currencies. And here you are merging not only the financial ability to impact society and life, but also encouraging it from a very political place, which I think helps, Jay, you to be the activist you are. Can we step back a little bit and just share with people what the foundation really is doing in sharing you through introduction? I shared about you as a person. I don't think you separate your person from your work that you're doing. Can you just give an ad real quick so we understand where our conversation's coming from?
Well, first of all, I run a family foundation, and it is really a family foundation. I work with my wife, I work with my sister. We're active philanthropists. This is what we do day in and day out. The foundation started focusing on the issue of disability, and we came into it as in disability rights. A lot of disability funding is done in sort of a charity vein. Let's help people, whether it with a job, education, housing, but a lot of that is done as a segregation form of philanthropy. Separate housing, separate schooling, separate workforces. And we really approached it as an integration, that people with disabilities have rights and they deserve to live in the community, work in the community, worship in the community, and be completely enmeshed in the community. And that's where we've pushed first in our local community, in the Jewish community in Boston, greater Boston, and then nationally and internationally. We've always had an office in the Boston area and in Israel, and our work in Israel is nationally focused throughout the Jewish, Muslim, Christian communities. But then our track took us into more of an activist philanthropy, really, challenging different sectors of society, and then working with them. So, it's taken us on paths that I didn't really envision in the beginning, but things developed that way.
Jay, that's really intriguing on a lot of levels. And one that particularly pops up for me is that here you are, and you're founded upon a principle for a group of people or a community, and you've spread it across many communities. Do you think that enabled your activism, or do you think the activism really pushed you there? And I want you to get behind that, because you've given a lot of thought to how you are instrumenting something from a family founded.
Right. So, I would say that we are a foundation that often brings our not only ideas but really the strategy to organizations, and has brought disability inclusion and disability rights into many different sectors of society where it didn't really exist. The Jewish community worldwide, was focused on disability more as segregationist, as let's help people who are less fortunate, not let's include them in our community. In Israel, our philanthropy is in partnership with the Israeli government, and the programs that we work on, which is really including people in housing and the workforce in Israel, is in conjunction with the Israeli government. So our investment is then adopted by the government and becomes governmental policy. I think where the activism comes in is looking at companies that have done something wrong, looking at celebrities who have done something wrong, or in the media, the portrayal of disability, and calling them on the carpet. And because we've had such extensive investments, we were a critical and legitimate organization to make these claims. And once the media gets a hold of it, then the ball's in the company's court to sort of respond, or the celebrity's court, or whatever. And what we're trying to do is raise the issue of the legitimacy of the disability movement as a rights movement, and have society embrace that.
Well, I love where you're coming from with that last conversation. And one of the things before we get into the next part of the question is let's level set and define what disability means. Some people are not conscious at times that they are, and you know, when it comes to bias, I'm particularly interested in the work around bias because one of my championships to people as I talk publicly and personally is there is unconscious bias, but there's also unchecked bias.
Right.
And so how do we define disability appropriately enough to cover both of those ways of being biased?
So interestingly enough, we have never, as an organization, defined disability.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple reasons why. A lot of the disability community is a very compartmentalized community. So you have parts of the community that they focus on people who are deaf or people who are blind or people who have cerebral palsy or autism or whatever the disability is. There are not many organizations that broadly look at the disability community. And we never wanted to get into that role of having to work with every different disability group. We thought it was more powerful to unite the community. So the way we look at it is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the historic piece of legislation, disability rights legislation in the United States, has been around for over 30 years. And that basically defines disability as anything that would require an accommodation in order to be part of society. So it could be anything from someone who is deaf or blind to someone with a mental illness. And so, in doing that, I think we've been have a more powerful message because the disability community, according to the Department of Labor, according to the United Nations, is roughly 20% either of America or the world population. It's a significant, population. I've always said that if the community was united, it would be the single most powerful political bloc in any country. Unfortunately, it's not a united community, and that's, I think, one of the failures of the community that needs to be addressed. But I think that no, we have not defined it. And by the way, now coming out of COVID, and we've done a lot of work on this, there's a lot of issues with mental health. And there's a lot of celebrities and sports figures that are speaking up and talking about anxiety and depression, which is so important because I think almost everyone faces those issues.
Absolutely, they do. And I believe not more than a couple of months ago, didn't Michelle Obama speak up and say, hey guys, look, it got to me. I think Michelle Obama spoke about having a moment of depression, whether it was a condition of depression or not. But Jay, the reason I leaned in on defining disability is because I think sometimes people are prepared to close their eyes to what they can't deal with. You've referenced a little bit about the encouragement to celebrities to take a different or better stand when you catch them not doing so. And I have a girlfriend who's dear to me. Her family started a foundation as well. And her mother did a lot of work when they are a wealthy Jewish family. And when she was growing up, she said she remembered going on vacations and her sister who had MS was not allowed into hotels. And here's a family who could afford to stay in any hotel they wanted, in any place in the world they wanted, but they could not do it as a family because her sister was deemed, and I think she even said one hotel told her, you can't bring her into the restaurant because she'll make other patients uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so her mother started to do work and they helped to fund. You may not be old enough to remember the Jerry Lewis telethons, huh?
Sure, I remember him. Yeah.
Okay.
Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, they were active with that. And they went on to work with the US on Americans Disabilities Act to
Mm.
ensure that people had ramps for sidewalks and accommodations in bathrooms in hotels. Why are we still fighting? Why is it still such an issue?
Well, I think that, yes, the Americans with Disabilities Act, public accommodations, public buildings, you do have accessibility. What you haven't really changed is attitudes. And I think the attitude has been historically over the years that people with disabilities deserve our pity and our charity, but not really, they don't have a place amongst us. And I believe that every family has someone in their extended family, their neighborhood, their friends who has someone with a disability. We're all connected to it. But over the years, I've heard so many horror stories about places of worship that were not accessible because places of worship in the United States were exempted from the Americans with Disabilities Act, even though Senator Tom Harkin, who's one of the authors of the act, said that was a mistake to exempt them. But I know many stories of people that were turned away from houses of worship. I know places that there's accommodations, but the attitude of the people that are running the organizations never changes. And I see, like in the workforce, every company who does an outstanding job at hiring people with disabilities and including them in the workforce, if you go back, the CEO has a direct connection to disability. They have a child, they have a brother, a sibling, someone with a disability, and that gives them the impetus to make their companies more inclusive. When you don't have that, you see a very poor rate of hiring people with disabilities. And there's all sorts of misconceptions, like the accommodations needed are very expensive, that they'll slow down the workforce. All of these have proven to be untrue. But you really need to change attitudes. I think that's what led us towards Hollywood and why we started to get involved in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think that's so smart that you did that. I want to go back though to the idea of the workforce at first, around any workforce when you're talking about corporate leadership. And we look, Jay, at where the word disability is. Is it named well? Does it send a message?
Yeah, I personally
Have you thought about that, Jay? Have you thought about that?
a lot. We've thought about it because, we always, first of all, there's a saying in the disability community, nothing about us without us. So we've always strove to hire people with disabilities, to have an advisory board with people with disabilities. We ourselves in the family have people with disabilities or children with disabilities. But the saying nothing about us without us means that you have to listen to the voice of the disability community. It's not always unified, but for example, we always use person first language. So it would be a person with autism rather than an autistic person. Now, there's not a uniform agreement on that, but I think I would go with that. Whatever society can understand when you're talking about a community, because right now disability is used, but it doesn't mean in the future a different word won't be used.
I know that for a fact. I mean, when you look at me and you see somebody who was born colored, then became Negro. James Brown said it loud and we became Black and proud. And then when I applied for scholarships at university, I was told to put African American on it. And I was confused by that myself, and my dad, and I've said this publicly, my dad said, listen to the greater writers. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. I think though that there is something to what you're saying about how we iterate the consciousness of persons with disabilities and let the name change. It may actually follow it if needed. But when you get to the work of it, where have you found the greatest success in aligning Hollywood toward putting the message out. I know Message Music helped do a lot for the civil rights movement. And
Right.
I think people with disabilities are strongly a part of that movement. And the platform that we speak from has to be cleaned up so people hear the message as you would think intentionally.
Right. So the way we got into it was we started to be very critical of the inauthentic portrayal of disability. Now, diversity is a big part of the conversation in the entertainment industry. And you've seen groups, the African American community, Hispanic community, Asian American community, many different communities, LGBTQ, really rise up in power over just the last half dozen years. The disability community has never reached that level of acceptance. And in fact, playing a disability as an able-bodied actor has been seen as great acting. And in the last 30 years, half of the men that have won the best Oscar have won it for playing a character with a disability. So then when you start talking to the entertainment community, say, well, listen, people with disabilities deserve to have a chance. They deserve to have a chance to represent themselves. How do you get that message across? Well, we started doing it by being highly critical of movies and TV shows that were inauthentically portraying disability. So for example, a movie like Blind, where Alex Baldwin was playing a blind, character, and we came out very strongly against that, but it raised the conversation because criticism initially gets people, first of all, it gets the media to pay attention, and it gets people in the industry to say, oh, well, there's an issue here. But then we moved from being critical to working with the studios and saying, listen, we have a set of principles and we'd like you to agree to audition actors with disabilities for your roles. And we got CBS and NBC Universal and Paramount, and there's another few studios in the pipeline to agree to these principles. So now people with disabilities will have more opportunities to be in the casting process and have some role and eventually rise up to be, stars. And I think that we've injected disability into the diversity conversation in Hollywood. We're not completely there yet, but I think we've made a lot of inroads in that area.
And I think it opens the door so much to not just having people with disabilities play roles that drive empathy or show need for assistance. I think it allows people with disabilities to also play roles showing benefit and help and innovation to society.
Right.
That
Right.
all exists.
The other thing that we started to do is periodically, every few months, we'll recognize TV shows and movies that have done a great job in casting an actor with a disability, and we give them the seal of approval. And now we have shows, movies coming to us and saying, can we get the seal of approval? Because now we're sort of giving a stamp like, yes, you've done the right thing. You're an example to other productions. And
what about series, or what about content that's being produced outside of the legacy network system? How do you reach them, and how are they doing?
I think that on the streaming services, because they put out so much content, there's a lot of good content there. And there's a lot, and I see it all the time. And I can sense that things are changing. I can sense it on sort of like a case-by-case basis, that a lot of actors with disabilities who I know are working, and they're getting a lot of different, parts. But you can also see it when you watch television and you watch, movies. The change is a little bit slower because it takes years to make a movie, and you're seeing something that was made a while ago. But TV is much more rapid, and now you're seeing more and more people with disabilities appearing. And why is that important? You can legislate. You can have the Americans with Disabilities Act that will, mandate accommodation, But unless you change attitudes, unless the attitude of the public changes, or the attitude of the people that are making the decisions as to who appears on television shows and movies, unless those change, you don't really change the way people are internalizing these issues. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get at the hearts and minds of people and to understand like this is a rights issue. You can't take a whole class of people and say, we care about your stories. Your stories are really interesting. We want to see Rain Man. We want to see, My Left Foot. We want to see Forrest Gump, but we don't really want to see a person with a disability in that role. And I think that will change. And I've learned over the years to recognize producers and showrunners and directors who really see it and then become champions. Like, I'll give you an example. Edgar Wright, there's a movie Baby Driver out a couple of years ago, and he was
I saw that several months ago. Yeah.
Yes. And he was casting for the role of the lead character, Baby's father. And the role was for a deaf person. And he had a bunch of, he tells this story, a bunch of different actors come and try to play a deaf person. Once C.J. Jones, who is deaf, came in and he's like, it was a no-brainer. Obviously he can play someone that's deaf better than someone who's not deaf. And so you have champions like Edgar Wright or Scott Silveri or John Krasinski with The Quiet Place, which The Quiet Place 2 is coming out, or is coming out now, or just came out. So you do have champions, and I think that I'm seeing changes in the studios. I'm seeing more examples of it at the film festivals. It's more prominent. So I think that things are changing, and I think we've played a role in that.
Jay, we call our listeners family, and for our family, what are some of the ways that they can invest their attention and political capital to ensuring that we're doing the right thing around people with disabilities? And I'm going to ask you this primarily from a place of personal care. As you were just talking, I was thinking about how Black people felt about blackface. And while blackface was done in the media in a derogatory manner toward Black people, even when movies used people to portray other ethnic groups, when they could have had good people portray those roles themselves, I think you rang a bell for a lot of people listening right now.
Right.
What do they do about it now that they've heard it?
Well, listen, whatever field you're in, I think that you should not let injustice go by. Where you see injustice, you should speak up against it. And, it could be someone, with a disability not being given a chance in the workforce, or not being welcomed into your house of worship, or not being allowed to live in your neighborhood. And not just disability. In any case, you could see, someone who is different not being accepted. And the best way to combat that is to speak up against it. Because at the heart of America is individual rights. When individual rights are being ignored, that's a problem anywhere in our society. And I think that everyone has a different position in life and a different role that they play. But we all, as citizens, we talk about politics, not only the right to vote, but the right to speak out. We have the right to free speech, and we have, and people pay attention. I know we live in a very polarized political environment. And I'm not saying that, you should take it the wrong way, but I think people should not be afraid to speak out and say, listen, there's an issue. Now, sometimes we'll speak out to the media. Maybe that's not comfortable to everyone. Maybe they want to speak behind closed doors to someone, to their boss or someone else. But the more of us that speak up, the more fairer, equitable society we're going to live in.
I think, when you talk about the data And you say, Jay, that 20% plus or minus, and it may be getting more plus every day, of society, whether you're looking at American society or global society, is people with disabilities. You're talking about a great opportunity to speak regardless of where your politics is from.
Right, right.
Disabilities impact people without pleasure of politics.
Right. No, it impacts every sector of society. And that's why I talked about celebrities, because especially with well, I think most of your listeners, but certainly, younger listeners, they will look up to someone that they admire who's had success, whether they're a sports figure like, Kevin Love in basketball, or maybe a Demi Lovato, or so many celebrities have spoken up. We gave Michael Phelps an award a few years ago. Taraji Henson, who's a well-known actress, for speaking up and talking about depression and anxiety. And by them saying it, it's like, okay, well, I might be in high school, I might be a kid in high school or a young professional, but it might give other people to speak up, because the worst thing you can do is just to bottle it all inside and not be true to yourself about what's going on, and be afraid to talk to others about it. We did a report, we've done dozens of white papers, but one of the white papers that we've done, which keeps on getting coverage in the press, is more police and firefighters die by suicide than in the line of duty. Now, why is that? Because they're in a profession where if you come forward and you tell your supervisor, I'm dealing with depression, I'm dealing with anxiety, they're afraid they're going to lose their job. Their gun and their badge will be taken away. But the more open you are about it, the more police departments that say, we need to help people who are working for us instead of ignoring the issue, then you wouldn't have this crazy statistic where more people are committing suicide than you expect. A firefighter, police officer, there's a good chance that they're going to be hurt or be killed in the line of duty. That's the profession they're in. But we shouldn't have people dying by suicide just because they're not getting the help they need.
And when you think about how many people have come face to face with issues of their own mental health or physical health as they were brought home for COVID, and now we're looking at how we re-enter a new society with a new normal. I think that what you've been working with, probably people have a better ability to listen about their own disability, not just when we see physical signs of people having disabilities. And so I think you're going to be touching a lot of people in their hearts and heads right now, Jay, who are listening to your message. Let me go back to when you spoke about celebrity engagement. It is true that much of our family are following celebrities and have their ideal celebrities. When you talk about speaking up, how do they best, and is it a good idea to utilize their Instagram and their social media to contact celebrities about being more vocal, or encouraging those with star power, which ends up being funding power, to be able to speak to their companies and their production outfits about including people with disability? How do we hit it from both ends best?
Well, I mean, I think the world of
And is that a good idea?
I mean, I don't see anything wrong in it. My experience with people who are celebrity figures in society have gained status because of their talent. I always say, as I get older, I am in awe of talent, whether you're an actor or a sports figure or whatever. When someone looks at, you're in a conversation and people will often say, "Oh, yeah, I could do that. I could hit that golf ball. I could, no, you can't. You can't. These people are the best in the world. And the actors that you see work really, really hard at their craft, but they're also basic people. And some people are better than others. So, like, for example, we worked with Octavia Spencer, who was great. She didn't want any money for making a statement. She just believed in diversity. She believed that disability was not being injected into Hollywood in the conversation. And it was great to work with her. Other people, they want money for it, or whatever. I mean, look, there's all different types. But I think that most people, whether you're a company or a celebrity, people respond to pressure.
Mhm.
Now, when we put pressure out, it's very respectful. We were the first organization to, when Donald Trump mocked a reporter with a disability back in the 2016 campaign, we were the first organization to come out and to say this was not right and he should apologize. And we offered to meet with him and to provide some training about how you refer to people with disabilities. We said it was wrong, but we'll work with you. Of course, he didn't take us up on that and didn't, apologize. But you always want to approach criticism with a path forward.
Mhm.
Criticism just for the sake of being critical, I don't think works.
Mhm.
Criticism for the sake of moving things forward has always been important. If you look at any civil rights movement, you always challenge, but you challenge for the right reasons and you give a path forward.
I so love what you're saying, and I mean that's good business as well. In our corporate environments, we tell people it's great to find the fault, help us solve for the for the outcome as well. Um, when you think about the impact that image has on the greater society, you do typically think about it from a sympathetic or a social nature. Let's talk about the good business of inclusiveness around people with disabilities as well, Jay.
Sure. So we've done many different white papers geared towards the entertainment industry, and one of them we did was the marketability of the community. And it was a poll of general society as to their desire to see disability authentically portrayed, but also how much money they would put towards this, and how much money would people who have someone with a disability in their family would put, and it's billions of dollars. So
Mhm.
the money is there. I think that we've gone through a transformation in our lifetimes when there was not real authenticity. Forget about disability. Go back to the Westerns. How many people that were playing American Indians or Native Americans were actually Native American?
Mhm.
Very few. But if you look at a movie today that portrays Native Americans, I guarantee you those actors are Native American.
Mhm.
Or if there was a movie, focused on people from Hispanic origin, I guarantee you they're Hispanic or African American. I mean, you talked about blackface, which was in the past part of the Hollywood story. It's no longer part of the Hollywood story. So I think that pressure brings about a better society. It's not always clean, it's not always pleasant. There's a lot of back and forth. But ultimately, if you think you're doing the right thing, stick with it. Just be respectful in the way that you do it.
Yeah, and we talk about so much around movements as occurring in the US. We are a global society and economy. And while regionally some things stay unique, the window that so many of us have, especially as we get younger and younger, is one that is global, and communities are defined differently. When I was growing up, your community was basically that which you lived in, and
Right.
and that meant very physically with a zip code attached to it, right? Today, my community is my, what is it, URL, and where I decide to go there. And we can belong to more than one community. That puts another layer on top of the whole discussion you had that I think we stayed too briefly on around how do we connect the existence of need for enlightenment around people with disabilities across different layers of identifiable communities. You mentioned, Jay, cerebral palsy, MS, then you talk about whether or not it's going to be the Jewish community or the Muslim community or the Christian community. Then you talk about whether it's going to be the Northeast or it's going to be the American Medical Association or the people who design product. One of the things my girlfriend, and I'm really worked up about this because one of the things that my dear girlfriend shared with me is her desire to have made ready for market wear, not just for people with disabilities, but all people, clothing that is better, you're better able to wear. We got a lot of buttons and zippers that make it difficult for style if someone wants to be independent. So when you look at all of these complexities and going back to the idea that it's global on the industrial as well as the regional front, where are we? Are some of us doing better than others? And what can we learn from one example to the next?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, we live in a very complex world where we have different connections, and our connections can be global as well as local. I think whatever community you find yourself part of and you feel that you identify with, that's the community that you work in. And leadership still matters. I mean, when I get a catalog in the house and I see models that are plus size, or a model with a disability, that's progress. That means that company has decided that there's a market out there and society doesn't just look one way. And we have people of different colors and different backgrounds, and they should be portrayed not only because that's what society looks like, but because there are different segments of society that have the power to buy their product. I mean, but there's a leadership involved there, and you better believe that different companies in the same industry look at each other all the time. What are they doing? How have they portrayed it? So I see a progress, but I see it's very, I mean, if you look at our politics in America, and not just in America, but different parts of the world, if you look at the politics, we're a very divided society. You have a part of society that says, I like change and I want this change to continue. And then you have another part of society that says, I'm afraid of change. Change is a threat to my life. And that's basically the dichotomy that we see. But, it doesn't mean that we should not continue to advocate for what we feel is a better society. We started talking about my love for politics. I think for me, I began to see politics, and if you go back to when I was in high school, I spent a summer as a congressional page in Washington. Now that was so long ago, when Democrats and Republicans, talked to each other and worked together. We live in a very stratified society. I don't think politics is very pleasant these days. And plus, you spend 90% of your time fundraising. And that's not legislating. That's not, making laws. That's just raising money to stay in your position. So I think ultimately that is what led me to be very jaded from politics. But I saw there was a way to be influential outside the system. And that's when I developed more into an activist.
I'm just sitting here and I'm imagining how my mom's going to feel when she listens to this podcast and she hears the bravery that you have to bring to what you do. And Jay, please forgive me if that sounds like an overstatement to you. For me, I see a lot of bravery in what you do, especially when we think about all the other options you've had in your life. How did you come to this being the thing that you were going to publicly be known for and personally champion for?
Well, I think that I've always felt and I think this goes back to where I grew up in Massachusetts a while ago, where the Kennedy family said, listen, we came from a situation of wealth, but we feel an obligation to give back. We feel an obligation to be involved in public service. So I always wanted to devote my life to public service.
Mhm.
It just changed the way I viewed a public service. But in terms of the disability issue, we came into that not because we had a certain affinity for that community. It was more like we committed a certain amount of money, which was a substantial amount of money, to making our community more equitable. And the part of our community that we were ostracizing was the disability community. So that's why
Mhm.
we got into it. And then my philosophy of philanthropy is you go narrow and deep. You
Mhm.
focus on an issue, become an expert in an issue, you fund that issue, and you talk about that issue, and that's where you have added value. So that's what we've really done. But I think that different people at different points of their lives decide, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I like to do. And I
Mhm.
think for those people who are in the nonprofit sector, who are activists, who are involved in public service, this is really where they want to focus their lives. And I think they can do a lot of good. I think that people in the business world can do a lot of good, because they have a lot of status and power, and they can take that status and power and directly impact the policy of their companies, and their companies can influence other companies. So I think we all play a role, and we can all be good corporate citizens, good public citizens. One role is not more important than the other. I think we all sort of end up working together.
Yeah, there are two things that I really want to lean in on and gain your thought on, or even direction. Let me go to the bigger one first. Um, you talk well about the power of utilizing celebrity and media to move us forward. How do we engage at the university, the college, and within the education system? How do we better engage that we are teaching people early and exempling, and if legislatively able, requiring stronger, better education and engagement?
Well, I think there are people that are doing great work in all those fields. There are people that are constantly working on legislation, whether they be associated with a member of Congress or a state legislature, or whether they're an outside group that is advocating for a certain position, and they work with elected officials to try to get the best.
Jay, should universities be required at the freshman or the baccalaureate, before baccalaureate degree is issued, to have taught around this subject? We have the big conversation now about diversity and inclusion. We have the big conversation about race and how we put that into the classroom, and whether or not we require to reframe history. I mean, I was an adult before I found out anything about a president needing a wheelchair.
Mhm.
How strong can we be? How strong ought we to be when we talk about our citizens with disabilities?
I think we have to do a better job, and I think universities need to do a better job. I think I'm on a board, and we're going to meet tomorrow, and we're talking about the makeup of the board. Does our board reflect society? And I think we have to do a better job at recruiting board members from different backgrounds. I think in the essence of your question, what historically has happened is disability was not seen as a community. It was
Mm.
seen as, because if you look at the history of disability, you talk about institutionalization,
We put over
segregation,
here. We put
right?
them over here.
And so seeing people with disabilities as a distinct community that have rights, that's a fairly new concept. And so yes, it should be taught about, and it should be talked about.
Not just rights and value.
Right. So I think it's all part of the same issue, not discounting a sector of society. And we all know that there's been sectors of society. I mean, our history of the United States was built on racism, which we're still dealing with today, on a daily basis. And it's still something that America has to work through.
And initially we saw Blacks of African heritage or slave engagement, we saw them as a worse form in people's minds of people with disabilities. We saw them as 3/5 of a person.
Right.
It took law to make Black people whole people in this country. And now we can look at that, and some of us, maybe not all, some of us can say, how ridiculous. And so we fast forward to 2021, and you and I are having the same ridiculous conversation about no matter how much we legislate law, we can't legislate hearts and attitudes to make what is sound, to make that average, to still take people and put them over here.
Right. But if
what is that about, Jay? What is that about?
If you look at the end of the Civil War and the emancipation of the slaves and the period of Reconstruction, where people began with their votes to flourish and to become elected officials and leaders in society, as soon as those laws were pulled away, there was the reverse to the Jim Crow laws and terrible lynchings, and which went on for decades and decades and decades.
I had a cross burned on my porch.
Yeah, you see. So I think so. The mindset was never changed. We never changed the mindset of the population. We told them you can't do this, but then once that was pulled away, things reverted back to the way that they were. And I think that what we have to focus on is the mindset. We have to focus on accepting people who are different than us as equal, that we're all people, we're all human beings. We are all have traits that are basically alike, and we need to have respect. And when you don't have respect, I don't think you can legislate respect. You can legislate the way you need to treat people. But if you don't get into someone's heart, and say, listen, people are people no matter who they are, what they look like, what their abilities are, then things generally don't change. And so we have sort of taken, we didn't want to get involved in legislation because there are enough people working in that field. But working in entertainment and challenging the entertainment industry, there weren't people doing that. So that's
have you ever heard of a group called Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes? They went on to have one of their lead singers, who people actually thought was Harold Melvin. His name was Teddy Pendergrass. And Teddy Pendergrass was a soul singer, very, very popular soul singer. He was in an automobile accident, and it left him in a wheelchair.
Right.
And I remember the big conversation around people who were very close to me on a personal level. They knew that I loved his singing, and they said, are you going to be able to go to his concerts now, though? How can you listen to him sing love songs from a wheelchair? That's the mindset people had. And I think that's what you're talking. By the way, from that wheelchair, he could still blow. Okay. He could blow. And I think he actually sang with a different and heightened level of passion. There's so much work to do in how we see people.
Right.
It's not even about, and think about it. You and I have been engaged in this conversation for a minute now, and it's not even been about the curing. It's not been about the science of how we're preventative or curative around this. it's all been about how we change people's minds. Is
Right.
that amazing?
I think, you know, a friend of mine, Daryl Chill Mitchell, who's a well-known actor um, on NCIS New Orleans, and he's been on many different things. And he was a good actor. He was an accomplished actor before he was involved in an accident and paralyzed. And he, I mean, I'm quoting him, you know, what he said. He's like, when I became paralyzed, it was like I was black all over again. So the
Mhm.
discrimination that he faced as an African American actor, but he established himself and he became a well-known entity as a good actor, but then had to prove himself again after he was paralyzed. And he's still a great working actor, you know, but we tend to look at people, as you said with Teddy Pendergrass, you look at people a certain way and they change and you look at them a different way. I mean, we
Mhm.
could talk about all different, the elderly, how we, you know, treat the elderly in all different, you know, sectors of society, but we're not great yet. We're getting better, but we're not great.
I love that you say we're getting better. I love that the optimism is not defeated by the reality of the moment. Um, Jay, I could just tutor at your feet. I could just listen and let you tutor me forever on this. One of the things, and we are going to put up some ways that people can be better engaged from wherever they are to take
Okay.
care of what we need as a whole society. One of the things that I do enjoy to do is 4 for 4. And I'm going 4 for 4 with you now. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So, Jay, your first of 4 is if you could host a dinner for any 4 people from any period of time, living or dead, who would be there at your dinner and why?
That's an interesting question. I think definitely Abraham Lincoln, because I think Abraham Lincoln saved the United States when the United States could easily have been wrought into 2 different, you know, countries. Um, and he did, you know, emancipate the slaves. I mean, he came through, if you study Lincoln, a personal process, but I think he was a open person. And I think he was willing to admit mistakes. So Abraham Lincoln, you know, would be one of them. Um, I would say, you know, 2 people that I would, as an activist, that I would really want to sit down and talk to are Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. And just, you know, because I mean, they dedicated their lives and they gave their lives for what they believed in. And it wasn't just, you know, I'm out there talking about something. They lived it, and they lived it where they were really, you know, physically put to the test. And I would say there's so many people, and you know, I'm picking some men, but you know, I could pick, you know, some women like, you know, Rosa Parks, and you know, people that really, I think, changed the way society through their actions, you know, looked at things. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in terms of, you know, changing the law in terms of how we treat women. Um, I'm giving you more than 4, but I would say the final one that I would say, just from a religious point of view, is Moses.
Yeah. Wow.
Just, I mean, in terms of my religion, Moses is really the central figure at leading, you know, our people to salvation.
And you know, you are the first guest to name Moses to dinner.
Okay.
And you named him in homage to your religion. I would suggest to you that I will come and serve that dinner because I'd love to be there out of gratitude and respect because my religion didn't happen without yours. Andre Crouch said years ago on an album, I don't know if you're a fan of vinyl or not, but this was back when it was the way to get music. And I had an album called Take Me Back. Andre Crouch is people would say he's a gospel singer. And in the introduction to that song, I don't quote him, but I reference him. He said, he taught, religion is a search for God and faith is a relationship with God. And he was to me, he was reaching out to the Christian community to be very careful about how you sect yourself, and that we listen to everybody's message, no matter what book that message came from. And so, yeah, I would love to serve dinner when you have Moses present. I've been doing a lot of studying myself recently. Jay, let's go 2 for 4.
Okay.
Music. What are you listening to and why? That you can share with us.
What am I listening to now, or historically what I listened to?
Be free to aggregate or separate.
Okay. Because I was a huge Michael Jackson fan. Growing up, and I still, it takes me back. I mean, Michael Jackson became the star he is as I was growing up. And I just think that his talent as a performer, I've never seen anyone, I tell my kids, I've never seen a performer like Michael Jackson. And now, what we know about him, that he had an extremely difficult life and, died, very, very young. I would say the other person that really influenced me that I was very also growing up was Prince. And I recently learned on a 60 Minutes interview with some people who run Paisley Park that he has.
Was that the Don Lemon interview?
I think so. He has so many albums that he recorded that he never released. He can essentially release an album like for the next 40 years. There's so much material. I just think he was a very prolific artist, and and they were both very definitive around the same time of their industry. So, I mean, I love music. There's so many different, but they just, I don't know, spur of the moment, stand out as two people that I really identified with.
But you got to give me 4.
Oh, 4? Okay.
As you think on those other 2, let's just delve into the first 2 though.
Okay.
Michael had vitiligo, and that may not be seen as a disability to some, but it was very differentiating to him, and the color thing that he fought publicly about, where he didn't come out and say, I have vitiligo. And so people took it every kind of way when he tried to redress himself from it. And Prince had his own issues as well. And, he developed a disability from all of the work he did. So it's interesting, sometimes talent is born from some very deep, maybe even dark places.
Right. I think that with Michael Jackson especially, but I would say anyone, I've always said, and because I'm in touch with celebrities and I'm watching the world of Hollywood, I don't think fame is a natural way for anyone to go through life. And if my kids ever say, oh, I'd like to be, famous, I said, I don't think you would. Do you want to walk out and be so famous that everyone knows you and can stop you anywhere and to talk to you? I mean, I think that the psychological impact that has on someone is very, very difficult. And if you're someone like Michael Jackson, who's a star from 5 years old and essentially never had a childhood and never knew a life, without, fame, I just think, I look at today's stars who are more open about issues of mental health, which in the past people were not open. It's because I just think being in that position is not a natural position for a human being to be in. We eventually need some downtime where people don't know who we are. And so, I think that's, an issue. And ultimately, I think it led to a very, painful life. I mean, a lot of artists that we've followed throughout the years, how many do we know who've died at a very young age? Too many.
Yeah, yeah. What about your other two though?
Um, Let me think. There's been so many. I mean, I used to love James Taylor. I just love his
Oh yeah,
voice.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, I just remember, when I
And
was in,
his stories.
yeah, and he's from Massachusetts. So, it's
Mhm.
like, it was something, I used to listen to. And then, of course, I probably can't leave the Beatles out because I think the Beatles, were one of the most transformative musical groups of our life, or, recent times. I mean, they're
My
just,
husband, my husband, who was Yorkshire born and Norman Saxon Yorkshire born, uh, used to say the Beatles, because he believed music had that ability to change society.
yeah.
And he said, it's our hymns that hold us together when we're in church. It's our freedom songs that hold us together when we may be fighting on opposite sides of an issue. And he thought it was our love songs that held us together as couples. And so he just thought music had so much transforming quality to it, uplifting quality to it. And he spoke about the Beatles with reverence because he said, as far as their music goes, it wasn't the music I went to by choice if I'm having a party.
Right.
But he said it definitely changed England for the worker. You
Right.
know, it changed that caste system in England, he said dramatically, the music that they gave, and
And
so
I think the way they transform themselves, from how they started to how they ended, and the just the range of music and the experimentation that they were able to do was just, I think, there's a story that, one of the Beach Boys, listened to the Beatles and just like went into a depression because
mhm,
sometimes you're like, I'm just not going to be there, you
mhm.
know.
What about my favorite song in life? Imagine, and John Lennon writing that.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, I think all of us got touched,
Right.
and whether we got touched by the music or the impact the music created, that's where I think you brought the magic in calling the Beatles out,
Right.
you
Right.
know? Hey, you gone 3 for 4, Jay? You're gonna go 3 for 4? You're batting 1,000 right now.
Did I give you four?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You did. Let me think about it. You did Michael Jackson, Prince, James Taylor, and the Beatles.
Right.
Did you have another one you want to throw in?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. There's some, the music is just, swirling around in my mind, but I'm not thinking of anyone particular right now.
You did pretty good. You pleased me, so I'm happy. Okay, let's go 3 for 4 here. And books. What books are you reading that you recommend to our family? Remember, we're talking about folks somewhere from 25 to 45-ish. And by the way, our family is global. What books do you recommend?
So
And
I,
why? And why?
I am a big John Grisham fan. I read all of his books. I think it's because I'm a lawyer by training, and I think he's a great storyteller. A lot of his stories take place in the South, which I find to be, it's not an area that I grew up in, but I find it to be very fascinating. I think he writes about like where he's from. And I've read almost all his books. So I like,
Did you have a favorite?
did I have a favorite?
Because he went to movie too with his, he
Yeah, some of the early ones. I've read, mainly in the last, I don't know, 20 books that he's put out. There was a time when I didn't read his earlier books, but then I got into him. Um, I don't think there's a particular favorite that sticks out, for me, but I just, whenever he comes out with a book, I'll pick it up and I'll read it because I just
because I
enjoy.
haven't read Sully, and I want to. My sister said I should read Sully by him. By the
Right.
way, you and Trish are so similar so far because you had two of the people who would be on her dinner list. You
Okay.
named Prince, and she is like Miss Paisley, okay? And now you've named John Grisham, who's at the top of her off the list. So you guys may be twins from different places.
So I did read Sully, and it's different than, because most of his books about law. This is about a young man from South Sudan who's discovered as a basketball player and comes to the United States, and his family goes through a tragic situation in South Sudan, and he eventually tries to bring them to the United States. And I won't ruin the whole, what happened
Oh,
in the book.
that's probably why she asked me to go ahead and read that. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't want to give away the whole plot, but it's different than other things that he's written, but I enjoyed it.
But
I
I
think
was asking you your favorite. Did you have a favorite, or is that like having a favorite child?
yeah, I can't think of a book that I would say it's my favorite John Grisham. I've read
Mm-hmm,
so many of them.
mm-hmm,
Um, in terms of like historical books, I mean, I definitely, Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. I
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
definitely, read it so long ago, but I think, the allegories, like the symbolism. I mean, I think it's, someone who was thrown out of society and then, reinvented himself, and then, gave it all away to save, the person he loved. I mean, I think it's just, I've always enjoyed that book.
Jay, didn't someone do? I think I watched it in French with English subtitles. A movie recently that was a modern rendition of the Les Miserables content, and it.
Yeah, they did a musical version recently where a well-known actor whose name I'm blanking on right now, he's Australian, played Valjean. Trying to think of his name. Why can't I think of his name? Um, anyway, it has been made into a movie. I've seen the play many times. I think it's, the music is wonderful, but I think if you to sit down and to read that book, I just think it was beautifully written. I mean, it's one of my
Mhm,
favorite books of
mhm,
all time.
mhm, mhm.
Um, I mean, there are certain authors, I'm a bookstore person, and I'll go in and I'll pick up, books from all different, types of authors and read them, and some great, stories. Um, I like Daniel Silva. Daniel Silva writes suspense, but it usually involves the Mossad.
Mhm.
And he has Gabriel Allon is a character that who's the head of the Mossad. And I just, having lived in Israel and in America, I like that sort of suspense, novel. I like David Baldacci, who's another suspense writer, but, more, in America.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, I'm a reader. I read all sorts of different things, and I can pick up almost anything and read it. And I generally like fiction, but sometimes I will read some nonfiction. Um, yeah, there's some.
I'm so with you. I mean, reading is like the gift to myself. When I can have that time to sit and read, it's just so beautiful. And I'm deliberate about creating that time more than any other time. I'm deliberate about for myself.
Yeah,
You know.
I just read a book by Jojo Myers. Um, that was a great book. I really love that story. I think that your listeners would really love it. I'm going to give you the name in a second. Hold
Okay.
on. Edit this part. So,
No, we're good. I mean, we hang for good stuff, and you've been dropping gems.
yeah. Jojo
What's your
Moyes.
what is
Jojo Moyes.
what is your it's Moyes?
Moyes. Jojo Moyes. The Giver
Mm-hmm.
of Stars. It's a great book. I mean, it's a
Wow.
story. It's a story, that takes place in Appalachia, and these women who start in following the Depression, a library. They deliver books on horseback, and I just think the characters are wonderful. The way she writes is wonderful.
As they're delivering those books as part of Eleanor Roosevelt's
Right.
library
Right.
initiative. Hey, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm gonna read that myself. I have not. I picked up one from you. Thanks.
Yeah.
You've been dropping gems and I've been picking them up. You ready to go 4 for 4?
Sure.
This, please give us, whether it's of your own making or given literally to you by somebody else, 4 pieces of advice you have for our family today. 4 pieces of advice that you consider best.
So a lot of the lessons I learned, I think, was from my dad. I remember him giving me a quote by Calvin Coolidge that I've then given to my son, which basically says, talent alone is not a recipe for success. Intelligence is not a recipe for success. Success has always come about through persistence and hard work. And, I mean, that's something that I really believe. If you're going to be successful, you have to be persistent. You have to really, so many people start something or they approach someone and they're like, yeah, I haven't heard from them. The people that are successful bang down that door all the time, and they might get rejected, but eventually they're going to get through and they're going to have, their success.
That's powerful. My husband, his one big thing he wanted to leave with our children was persistence beats resistance every time.
Right.
Resistance can be smart, it can be talented, all those things you say, but persistence wins the day.
Right. I would say the other thing that I've picked up over the years is the root cause of all problems that I've ever encountered in my life has been ego. And whenever I encounter ego, it's crashed business deals, it's crashed, relationships. If I encounter that now at my age in meetings where I see someone with, an overly large ego, I just turn the other way.
Wow.
I think that the partnerships and the relationships that have worked out for me has been people that have been able to put aside ego and work as true partners. And so, that's one thing. And I recently heard a lecture about, when they talk in the Bible about evil, they're really referring to ego.
Wow.
Wow. I think that's something else I take away. And the other thing, what I told you earlier in this talk that, my dad said that success is, 20% hard work and 80% luck. And I do think that, you can work hard, but there's so much in life that you can't control. And we have to be thankful that those of us who have achieved success in whatever field we had, there's been some luck involved. My dad used to always say, there's no one that's successful that hasn't had someone along the way give them a hand or give them an opportunity. And I think that's true. And I think that you can't be discouraged. If you're persistent, and you meet people and you're respectful of them, eventually you'll be successful. All right. But you can't be discouraged, all the time when you have, I mean, so many people look at Harry Truman, failed at every single thing in his life until he became president of the United States. And it was not a bad president. So, yeah, I think that there's something going on in the universe out there that we can't control, but we're part of, and that you want to call it luck, you want to call it destiny or whatever, that exists for all of us.
Wow.
And then I would say the fourth thing is just hard work. I always tell my kids, find something that you love to do and work hard at it, because eventually it won't feel like work to you. It'll just feel like something that you love to do. And, there's nothing wrong with hard work. I know that a lot of people feel like, oh, I want to have instant success or, but there is a benefit in working hard just for working hard, that you get something out of it. You get a satisfaction. I don't care if you're sweeping a floor or, bussing a table or running, a Fortune 500 company. People that work hard enjoy what they do. And that's, I think, the secret to life, to get enjoyment. I mean, you don't want to go and dedicate your life to something that you don't love. And I've seen people, in very what we would consider, basic jobs. They love what they do and they're happy. And ultimately, I think that's what life's about. We want to be happy.
That's what Dalai Lama said, isn't it? That, the ultimate state people reach for is happy. If you understand that about them, you understand everything about them. Then you just get busy dissecting.
Right.
Jay, wow. I'm so blessed by your visit, and I don't just feel inspired. I feel better educated by your visit. I don't know what's next for you. If you do, please share with us. But wow, I'm blown away.
What I'm working on is I'm working on a book, which is a sort of a celebration of activism. And because I think there are many people who are activists who are not understood and are not celebrated. So this book is to celebrate activism and to give people who are activists or upcoming activists sort of the understanding that it's a noble way to spend your life. And I also do a podcast, which you can see behind me, which is dedicated also to activism, in which I have people from all different walks of life who have done amazing things in changing the world. And some of them from very, very, tough circumstances. I recently interviewed a woman who lost a child at the Sandy Hook mass shooting in Connecticut and has dedicated her life to working on issues of mass shootings, especially at schools, which is a plague in our community, in our society. But, so many interesting people. And, I hope people will listen to it because I think it's worthwhile.
Family, you gotta be listening to it. All inclusive. You gotta be listening to it. Jay.
Thank you.
From my heart to your home, I just so appreciate you being here. We've been enlightened, inspired, and as soon as I hang up, I'm probably gonna start crying. I just cannot believe, I cannot believe the gift of your wisdom today. No, I'm going to correct that. I believe deeply the gift of your wisdom today, and you're helping me to be a better person. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janice. It's been a pleasure, and I've learned a lot from you. And I'm glad I came up with 4 musicians, because that was the tough one for me.
Well, listening to you, I'm sure is going to be the music to a lot of people's ears right now. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice joining you.
Guys, please listen to Jay's podcast and be great students. Go read the books, listen to the music, but most important, follow the advice.
Thank you.